Welcome to the third and final webinar in our series. The series is called How Will I Assess Students Remotely? And today's final episode is going to focus on the current landscape and the challenges that are posed by delivering programming assignments remotely. So in this context, a programming assignment would cover a scenario where a student's submitting computer code, and we're going to talk about both formative and summative assignments. So how do we regularly assess where students are within their learning journey with regards to programming assignments? Before we get on to the main content, there's just a little bit of housekeeping for the webinar. It should last between 30 and 45 minutes. Everybody's lines are muted. However, if you do have any questions, please post those using the Q&A functionality within Zoom. Just use the chat just for any hellos, but the Q&A, any questions and comments should go in that section, and then we'll get to those towards the end. And the session is recorded, and we'll send that out in around 48 hours. So watch your emails. If you do have to drop off early, we'll send the recording out to everybody. So the agenda for today, we're going to start with some brief introductions of myself and my colleague. We'll touch upon programming in the curriculum in today's world, and we'll have a look at the challenges of delivering programming assessments. And then we're going to give you an introduction to Gradescope and how Gradescope can support programming assessments. And we'll finish with a quick Q&A and answer any burning questions that you have. So a little bit about myself and my colleagues. So my name's Jamie Whitehead. I am a product success manager for Gradescope. I work across the Europe, Middle East and Africa region and supporting our customers to be successful with Gradescope. I previously worked as an account manager within the UK, so working with HE institutions to help them understand their goals and help them implement Turnitin technologies to address those. And I'll hand you over to Jason just to give a brief introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Jason. I'm part of what is called the Professional Educational Services team at Turnitin. I've been with the company 5 years and 1 day. So I've worked with people from all over, from places like Kazakhstan all the way through to Iceland, with successfully implementing our solutions into their university or school or college. And I also support people with training as well. So making sure that everybody knows how to use our products and why it's important to do certain things within them as well. So great to meet you all over this series. And if you're just joining us today, hello. And I'll hand it back over to Jamie.
Brilliant, thanks Jason. So we'll move on to the content of the session. So we're going to start by taking a look at the landscape within education and beyond with regards to programming skills. The fact that we've got so many sign-ups and attendees to this webinar today, it shows how programming in particular is a growing area, and there's a huge focus and an increase in terms of teaching this skill at different levels of education. We've also seen globally that many governments see teaching programming skills as a longer term solution to that skills gap between the number of technology jobs and the people that are qualified to do them. So they've seen that adding in coding earlier into the curriculum in many countries is a way of addressing that skills gap. And because of this, we're seeing a renewed focus and an increase in this area. In terms of computer science courses in particular, these have become more and more popular over the years. For example, in the UK in recent years, computer science courses have been particularly one of the largest growing areas in terms of student enrolments. We've also seen more and more programming skills being taught across different courses, so not just focused on computer science, but also even within maths, engineering, for example, it's important to teach those skills. And this increase inevitably does lead to larger classes and a need for more specialized tools. When we finally look at the workplace, coding is becoming one of the most in-demand skills across various industries. It's now a transferable skill across many industries, so you wouldn't just be limited to working as a developer. For example, one 2015 US study saw 7 million job openings in 2015 were in occupations that required coding skills, and overall programming jobs are growing 12% faster than the market average. So really, the context is we're seeing a lot more need, a lot more demand, and a lot more need for specialised and effective educational tools to really cater for this demand. So with the rise in popularity of programming courses in the curriculum, it can pose certain challenges. So what we'll do now is just spend the next 5-10 minutes or so just delving into some of the most common challenges that we come across specific to assessing programming work, and we'll then take a look at how Gradescope can help address some of those challenges. So the first challenge, which I would say is not actually specific to programming, but can be more of a general challenge with assessment, is in relation to grading consistently across a number of students. And we know that programming courses are becoming more popular, so obviously we're dealing with larger classes. This then can become a challenge when looking at how to grade consistently. So especially when you've got multiple people working on one assignment, some graders may be more lenient, others may be more strict. So it's important to think about how to ensure a consistent level of feedback to students in this context. A further challenge that we see is, which may be more specific to programming, is that instructors sometimes use many different systems, sometimes homegrown systems or home-developed systems to submit and grade code. This in itself is not so much a problem, but it can create different experiences for students depending on the courses that they're taking and the instructors that are delivering those courses. And it can sometimes cause confusion over where they submit and where they go to get feedback. So our considerations and suggestions on how to address these challenges would be to think about assigning different sections of an assignment to different graders, use standardized rubrics to make sure that you can support consistent approach and consistency. Obviously, embrace and use technology to support this approach, and consider using tools like Gradescope that allow you to submit, mark, evaluate the originality of the code all within one platform. So you really have then a streamlined and consistent experience, not just for the staff, but for the students as well. A further challenge, which again is not necessarily unique to programming, but which we still often see, is delivering feedback to students quickly. And particularly in a remote setting like today, institutions need to assess students more frequently. It's important to be able to check in and verify understanding, verify learning. And the question then does become, how can institutions quickly and easily do this without creating a lot of additional workload, particularly with regards to marking and grading? And then when you throw in the larger class sizes, it does mean that if you need to then regularly assess students to check understanding, there's a risk that this would increase your workload. So how do you ensure you're able to scale those classes without impacting the quality of the feedback that you provide? So some recommendations here would be, again, embrace technology, consider using that to ease your workload. So for example, can some questions be automatically marked? Consider using something like an auto grader for formatted code submissions, which would then take away that workload and speed up the feedback loop with your students so they're able to get real-time feedback. And if you're able to take away some of that workload with the use of technology, then you could also consider delivering more frequent low-stakes assessments that would enable students to get more opportunities for feedback. And we'll show you shortly how we've got some tools that can help you address these challenges and that offer these capabilities that I've mentioned. And finally, there's always the question of academic integrity. So how can I ensure students are not cheating? As I'm sure you know, plagiarism does happen in code as well. Most institutions are seeing an increase in code plagiarism. When we talk about code plagiarism, we're talking in simple terms about using another person's source code and claiming it as your own. So the challenge is, how can we verify the code quickly and easy? How can we verify that that's original? With code in particular, it's further complicated due to the nature of collaboration within the workplace. So collaboration is common and encouraged in ways that are probably unacceptable in a more academic setting when we talk about code. So in an academic context, students would be more likely to ask to submit their own work, for them to be assessed individually so they can demonstrate their understanding. So that's obviously different to a workplace setting where collaboration is more accepted. So some ideas and considerations here would be to make it clear what the rules are on academic integrity, make sure you define collaboration versus collusion, and define that up front so that students know that they absolutely can't cross that line, and it's clear what the expectations are. Emphasize and reinforce the policies on any policies that you have on using outside code. So if you do allow the use of outside code, or you've got a restricted source list, then you can ask the students to comment on their code to clarify any areas in which it's been borrowed from, basically asking them to cite their sources as you would with typical academic writing. And then finally, use software that reviews for similarity. So this can in itself act as a deterrent for misconduct, but it can also be used in conjunction with feedback to reinforce academic integrity. And we'll show you some tools within Gradescope that can help in this area too. So I'll now move into a brief introduction to Gradescope, which I've mentioned a few times throughout, and we'll now demonstrate how the programming assignment tool within Gradescope can help offer your assessments online, provide quick and detailed feedback, and ensure that the code is original. So before we do that, I'll just give you a little bit of background on Gradescope. Gradescope was created initially to modernize the grading process for paper-based work. In more recent months, we've added in online assessment capabilities due to the current pandemic, and we're supporting submissions and grading of programming projects as well, as we have been doing for a little while longer. So this allows you to assess multiple different types of work in one place and provide quick and consistent feedback. But it also gives you a wealth of insights into the students' performance and show you any opportunities for how students you may be able to improve the learning experience for your students. So I'll pass it over to Jason now, who will give you, as I said, a brief overview of how Gradescope could be a solution to help address some of these challenges, and then we'll come back for some question and answer.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'm just stopping sharing there, Jason.
No problem.
Over to you.
So let's get my screen up for you all. So first off, I hope everybody can see my screen. If not, just drop a message in the chat. So like Jamie said, we obviously don't want to be using multiple different systems to handle different types of assignments. You know, one of the big challenges with programming assignments is that, you know, a lot of people have built their own system, but you're then having to use that on top of many, many other things. The great thing that we've seen over this webinar series is that Gradescope is going to allow you to handle multiple choice questions. It's going to allow you to put in, you know, homework assignments where students are uploading pictures or literally writing out math problems, and also being able to deal with programming assignments. So if we go into create an assignment just in the bottom right corner here, and we select a programming assignment, which we can just see that, and then I'm just going to hit next. So first of all, we need to give this a name. So this is our Programming 101 class. Now, within Gradescope, we can grade in a couple of different ways. Technically, we can grade in 3 different ways. We can grade with an auto grader, so we can literally just set up an auto grader ahead of time, and when that auto grader runs, it's going to run unit tests on a student's code and bring back a score. We can also enable manual grading. So if you just want to purely, you know, look at certain factors within the code, not necessarily whether the code is right or wrong, whether it works, but more about style, things like that. Or we can actually have a combination. So let's say we want to have an auto grader, and we also want to have manual grading as well. That's just going to mean that we can be a little bit more critical, not necessarily in a bad way, but we can critique the students around different elements of their programming abilities. We then have our date, so, you know, basically when this assignment's available from. So we say this is available from yesterday at 4 p.m. in UK time, up until, let's say, Friday at 4 p.m. So just like any of the other assignments. We can also allow late submissions if we want. We can also allow group submissions, so if we have students submitting as a group, and we can enable the leaderboard. This is something that is only in the programming assignments. And the way the leaderboard works is it basically displays all of the other students' autograder scores in a leaderboard format. So if you want to have a little bit of competition, healthy competition between students, then this is a fantastic way to do that. So if we just go ahead and create the assignment, then you can see here that we have creating what is basically the outline. So you can see we've already set 100 points for the autograder. If we were doing autograder only at this point, we would just go ahead and click Save Outline straight away. So we could just skip anything else out. If we were doing manual grading only, we would just go ahead and put in our question and give the autograder 0 points. But in this case, we're going to have a multiple. So we're going to have an autograder and we're also going to have manual grading. So we're going to add points for style, and we're going to say that there are 30 points up for grabs. Then we go ahead and save the outline. Once we've done that, we can then upload an autograder. So there is guidance for the autograder, which is actually in the product. So you literally just click, it takes you through the guidance and it tells you how to actually set up your autograder. It has all of the things on there. And there are even actually pre-made autograders that are being used as well within that. So if you need a little bit of inspiration. Once that autograder is uploaded, we can then go ahead and start grading the code. So I'm just going to jump into a course that we already have here. So you can see we already have that style section, and we can then actually go in and start grading these submissions. So if we want to hit this style one, this is going to actually take us into the code. So what we have is we have our autograder results at the top. And then you can see here that it's returned basically those outputs. So everything that's in green is the unit tests that have passed, and everything that is in red is the test that has failed. Now, the autograder can be run on any Linux-based system. That's not a problem at all. So any language that is supported within that is not a problem for the autograder. The great thing about this is that this is going to give students feedback in real time. The autograder is basically like, you know, giving you the feedback on what is right and what is wrong within your code. And as soon as this assignment becomes available for the students, so as soon as it hits that release date, the students can resubmit as many times as they like, meaning that they can, you know, better their code and better that score. So it's almost like a game for them. What we can then do is we can focus on the actual things like the style of this assignment. So we can add rubric items. So we can say that there is insufficient commenting. If I can remember how to spell insufficient. And we can say, okay, so we're going to take off 5 points for insufficient commenting. And we can do this as myself. So if I'm just grading on my own, or if we have, let's say, like some of the courses in Gradescope, we have a computer science course, which is over 1,500 students. That'll be pretty difficult to grade on your own. So let's say there are 4 or 5 of us all grading together. If we are all grading this same question, this style element, then we can all use this same rubric at the same time. And if I make any changes, so we're going to go ahead and grade this one. We're going to head to the next ungraded, basically the next ungraded assignment, submission, sorry, which means that I'm not going to then go ahead and grade something that Jamie is already grading or that is already being graded by someone else. And we can then add in another rubric item. So let's say in this case, the student has not used the correct format. And we're going to take off 2 points. Now, the great thing about Gradescope is that everything has keyboard shortcuts. So if I just want to hit the number 3 on my keyboard, instead of having to click with a mouse, that's just going to select that rubric item for me. And if we also decide that there is insufficient commenting, we can combine these 2 rubric items together and take off 7 points. But if, like I said, I'm grading as a group and we decide, or I decide on my own that, you know, maybe 5 points is a little bit too heavy, we don't want to take off 5 points. We only want to take off 3 for insufficient commenting. What that will do is it will retroactively update that for every single other person that we use that rubric for. So like I say, if myself and Jamie are both grading this question and Jamie or I have decided that, you know, this is maybe too harsh or we're being too lenient, if we want to add more, take more points off, that's then going to update that for every other person that's had that rubric item applied to them. So instead of having to go back and redo everything, especially, like I said, if you've got a large class. So makes life a lot easier. Another really, really cool thing within the actual grading functionalities and feedback functionalities of Gradescope is that we can actually comment line by line on the student's code. So if we go down here and let's say we're happy with this one, I'm going to hit next ungraded or Z on my keyboard. I can then go in here, click on line 6, and then I can just input a comment straight away for the student. So they know exactly which line that's related to, especially if I'm being super specific. So if I'm being really specific and there's something that I want to critique about that exact line, the student knows that this is about line 6. We can go ahead and give them full points for that. So the really cool thing as well about Gradescope is how the students actually get the code into the system. So they can either just do this as a straight up file upload. They can submit from Bitbucket or their GitHub account, and they can just drag and drop those files when they go in and submit. So it makes it really, really easy for them. Now, the example that you're seeing in front of you is a calculator program written in Python. Now, you can obviously submit in any language. Gradescope is language agnostic. So you can just upload any language that you want within this platform. Like we said, you can build an autograder around that as well. So it's going to save you a ton of time and make sure that the students can obviously improve on their own as well. So once we've done all of our grading and our feedback, and let's say we have done all the commenting, what we want to do next is we actually want to make sure that the code is original. We don't want the code copied off other students. We don't want them working together when they shouldn't be. So we want to review that code similarity. And you can see that everything in the side panel here, nice and easy. So if we wanted to go back and do some grading or configure the autograder, we can do that. So everything's in the side panel, and then we just click on review similarity, and that takes us to this section here. So just a quick bit of information about the similarity report. So unlike text similarity, for those of you that are familiar with our other product, Turnitin and Authenticate, Gradescope uses something called Measure of Software Similarity, or MOS. Now, the difference between normal text similarity and code similarity is that within code, you can change things like you can add extra commenting, or you can rename the functions and variables. Now, that doesn't change the way that the code works or what its primary function is, but it changes literally how it looks. However, with MOS and the ability to apply AI to that before the code is run, it will still show us what is actually truly unoriginal. The other great thing about this function within the similarity report is that we can upload a template file. So if you have starter code that the students are going to use to generate their, like we say, in this case, a calculator program in Python, we want to make sure that that code isn't then being picked up and generated and added to that similarity score. So you can upload a template file, and then that'll actually remove that for you. Another thing to note is, unlike the actual full system in regards to the grading, the autograder, the similarity, so code similarity, only works in certain languages. So you can see the languages here. Now, we are obviously going to be adding more languages as we move forward in our roadmap, but these are the languages that are supported right now. So if you do ever wonder what languages are supported, you can see those straight away in that drop down, which is nice and easy. So let's get into it. Let's have a look and see what this actual similarity report looks like. So let's have a look at Darlene Pearson's submission. So we can see her file here. Let's click on that, and we can see that obviously there's quite a significant amount of similarity to Vanessa Gonzalez. So like we said, it's going to show you that code, but it's going to show you it side by side. So Darlene is the person on the left, the student that we selected, and the highest similarity that we see is to Vanessa Gonzalez, which is another student. So it's like Jamie said, we want to make sure that students are aware of the difference between, obviously cooperating with each other and doing group submissions and things like that, and collusion. So what we can see in this case is that line 14 to line 146 is showing up in this report as similar. In this case, it is pretty much identical. There is very little difference, if any, within these two submissions. What we can also see is that there is another match to someone called Caleb Martinez. So there's another 7% that is showing up, which is separate. Now, in the case with Vanessa, it was line for line. So it was line 14 to line 146 in Darlene's was exactly the same as line 14 to line 146 in Vanessa's code. Whereas with Caleb's, Darlene is probably potentially being a little bit smarter this time. Unfortunately, not smart enough to outsmart the code check. So what she's done is she's used line 34 to line 42 of Caleb's code and put it in line 118 to line 126. And like I said, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. So if you do change the variables, if you do add extra commenting, it is not going to fool the system because of the way that MOS works. So we can see here that there are differences, but we can still see that similarity there, which is very, very handy. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to have a conversation with a student to, understand why they use that code in that area, where they got it from, because, code does still require citations or acknowledgement of it not being their own. So that's what our code similarity looks like. That allows us to uphold that level of integrity. Now, what we want to do next is, obviously, if we found that students had, plagiarized, we could go back to the grading. We could go in and minus points off a student's submission because, we want to apply a penalty for plagiarism if we decide that that is the case. And like we said, those rubrics are going to retroactively update. So if we added in a rubric and we add points or we take points off for certain things, whatever we change is going to change across the board or just for that student, depending on what we do, if that's only been applied to them. But once we've done all of that, what we want to do then is we want to review the actual success of this assignment and the submissions that have been made. So we can either click the little statistics button, which is going to take us to the statistics. I'm just going to jump across in this tab that we have open already. The internet in my house is not quite as fast as the internet in the office. It's a typical COVID problem. So I've got a tab open already. And what I'm going to show you is how our statistics look. So with our statistics, we can look at them two ways. So we can look at them per question. In this case, we have 2 questions. If you think of it that way, we have the auto grader points and we have the points from style. We can also tag questions as well. So for instance, if we wanted to, tag it based on the program type or the language, we could look at everything within the assignment that's being done a certain way in that regard as well. We're going to look at this per question because that's the way that we want to look at this today. We can see across question 1 in regards to the auto grader results have been particularly positive. 82% of the students have been very successful, whereas the points for style, students haven't been quite so successful in that regard. Only 50% of them have achieved what we expected. So I'm going to click into the auto grader and I'm going to have a look at the more granular statistics based on the auto grader. So what we can see here is that nobody completely failed, which is great. Nobody got 0 points. Nobody got 1 point. The majority of students achieved over half of the points. So 14% of students got 11 points. Another 14% of students got 14. 29% got 16, 14% got 18, and 29% got full points. Now that's useful in itself, but what's even more useful is actually seeing the errors that relate to this area. So if we just knew what points people got, that would be useful. But what we need to know is why they maybe dropped points and why they got points. So if we scroll down, we can see the auto grader results, and we can see that everybody's test evaluating 1 + 1 came off fine. And then as we go down, we can start to look at, okay, what is it the students aren't quite as good at? So we can see that this test here, this test, so a lot of the 71%, this is where there has been more significant errors. A lot more students have actually received that as their auto grader output. So that could have been some of the errors or the things that have failed. So that gives us a really good idea what the students are good at and what they're not so good at. And that's something that applies across the board with Gradescope. It allows them to see, where is it the students are being successful and where is it that the students are actually struggling, and allows us to basically go and look at that straight away. So that pretty much brings us to the end of looking into the actual system. I can see that the Q&A is popping up quite a lot and the chat box as well. So I'm just going to hand it back over to Jamie. And we'll start addressing some of those questions that you have.
Brilliant, thanks Jason. Okay, so yeah, we've got about 5 minutes just to run through some of the questions, and then we'll do a bit of a wrap up. So there's a question here around whether there's a kind of basic version for online assessment. Someone has attended a couple of sessions and found them a little bit um, complex in terms of the level of IT skills that they've got. What I would suggest there is utilizing the resources that we have on our customer success and customer support team. So no matter what level you're at, we have resources to support you in terms of your different assessments and assignments. You can contact the team at help@gradescope.com and they'll give you help and advice on getting started and putting your assessments into Gradescope. So I would just say, take the plunge. Obviously, it might be nerve-wracking, but once you get up and running, it's really easy and simple to use. And we've got lots of resources to support you with that as well. So there's another question around the similarity tool, and basically someone said that two correct calculators will more or less be similar in terms of looking at the different algorithms, even if the students didn't cheat. I'm not sure that that similarity is the best way to avoid plagiarism. Now, what we would say here is exactly the same as what we would advise when using text similarity. We are just showing you the similarity. We are not telling you if something's plagiarized. So obviously that would always require the academic's judgment. So we easily identify the similarity and allow you to see that, and it's up to you to obviously look at what the intention might have been and investigate that further. Okay. So we've got a question here on the languages which are supported by the autograder. So Jason briefly mentioned this, but Gradescope provides a language agnostic platform for running the autograder. So it runs within a Docker container and it gives you full flexibility in setting up whatever language, compilers and libraries or other dependencies that you need for your assignments. So basically you provide us with a setup script and an autograder script, along with whatever supporting code you need. We manage accepting the student submission, running the autograder at scale, and then distributing the results back to students and to you. And there was also a question of how can I try out Gradescope programming assignments? So I'll come to this towards the end, but until the 31st of December this year, you're actually able to create your own account at gradescope.com, which is going to give you free access to the programming assignment. So you'll be able to use that until the end of December for free. You'll be able to use that with your courses as well as other supported assignments, which we've talked about in the other episodes in this series. So you can go and create your account and really just start to try out Gradescope and see how it can help you deliver your courses remotely. And if you need any help, of course, just reach out to the team at help@gradescope.com. Okay, so I'm going to just start sharing my screen again and just give a bit of a summary of what we've covered. So basically, we've talked about how programming is becoming more and more popular within the curriculum. That there are obviously still challenges related to scaling that and offering consistent and quick feedback. But we've seen how Gradescope can help you with a combination of auto and manual tools deliver really quick, consistent, and flexible feedback to your students using the dynamic rubrics as well as the automatic feedback within the autograder, and it supports programming assessments both digitally and on paper as well, which we've covered in a previous session. And obviously you've got that built-in integrity capabilities to ensure that you're addressing any similarity issues within the code. And as Jason showed at the end, you've got the insight into the student performance and basically able to identify any knowledge gaps to move forward with your own instruction going forward. Just a final kind of summary here, but as I mentioned before, Gradescope Complete is free until the end of December this year. We've made that available due to the current pandemic, because it was and is an excellent tool to help you deliver assessments remotely. Obviously, this session's been focused on the programming assignment. Previous sessions have looked at paper-based work and digital assessments and assignments. So if you've not seen those, I'd encourage you to check out the recordings. I'll get my colleague to post in the chat the link to those prior recordings. And we have some resources that can help support you get up and running, including training for new users and further webinars available through the link here. And as I said, the programming assignments are included within Gradescope Complete. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thanks for your time today. It's much appreciated. I know everyone's super busy. I hope that it was useful to get an insight into how we can help you with your programming assignments and help support your institutions deliver those more remotely. Any further questions, just drop us an email at the email that you see on screen. And as I said, we'll follow up in about 24 to 48 hours with a recording.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate you taking the time. For those of you that have been with us across the entire series as well, thank you very much for all of your time across the last couple of weeks. And like Jamie said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, and I would just say, for any questions that we've not been able to get to, so there was a few questions that have come in, we will follow up directly via email.